The first rule in grip sport is you tell everyone about grip sport.
Crushing, pinch grip, thick bar, wrists.
If the best guy in the world can't lift 100 pounds on it, I don't give a shit about it.
Okay, everybody. So another episode of the Grip Show. Obviously, Armlifting USA had the big event at the Arnold Classic here in Ohio recently, and Eric Roussin once again, my main recap partner here to help break everything down. Overall, Eric, did you just want to start off by maybe giving your thoughts on how you think everything went, and maybe just a quick summary of maybe your Arnold experience? I mean, you've done so many of these. Is there anything that I don't know stood out or was different that you could
Yeah.
note?
Yeah. So I've had the luckily I've been able to go to every single arm lifting event at the Arnold's going back to 2019. This was the biggest in terms of the number of competitors, and I think it's sort of at the maximum capacity in terms of single platform. It would be hard to get any bigger. Like things were rolling. I thought it was well organized, considering we had to move locations. The events were spread over the day, but overall, I thought it was a great contest. Yeah, the women's classes were the Arnold Classic always gets such a great turnout of women. You never get everyone in the same room, but this is the level of the women in the attendance. The bar is rising fast. But overall, I thought it was a great weekend, and looking forward to next year. Hopefully, I would like to see the events switched up a bit next time around. We'll see if that happens. But aside from that, I thought it was a great contest.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I think it was very, very competitive. Like there's years past, and where there's maybe been 4 people per class for some of the men's classes and things like that. And not saying that wasn't the case for a few things, but I do feel like the depth of divisions was a little bit bigger. And I feel like there was a lot of close point spreads that we can get into once we get rolling through each class. But yeah, I think it was very competitive. The only thing I could maybe slightly change in my head, if you had in a perfect world, would be like I just think the splitting up in 3 different locations for that Saturday for most of the people, trying to squeeze 70 kg all the way up to the 110s, same room, same stage. It worked out. It wasn't too bad. Maybe a little crunched on time here and there, but just being drawn out where you have to warm up, basically max out, go screw around for 2-3 hours, 4 hours. Okay, jump back up, switch back on, do it again, wait another 5 hours. I just think that wasn't really ideal for.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. Luckily, we were all sort of in the same boat and having to deal with the same thing for. But I am happy we did get some stage time on. I really like the Rogue Strength stage because it's a really open area in front. Mm-hmm. And when we were lifting, there were a lot of people watching, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that honestly, it's tough to tell, but I almost think that at that moment, being Saturday, kind of noon, almost peak time, I almost think that we might have had more people watching our classes, during that time frame than even the main stage did when the super heavies were going. I mean, it was almost like same stage, same people, whether it be main stage or Rogue stage. Yeah, it was very open, and there was a lot of people there. So
I think you're probably right. Obviously, the ones who were on the main stage, they got the video, so we didn't get the video stream. Yeah. But I was happy overall, and to me, it's inconvenient to have the first event like at 8 a.m. and your last event like at 8 p.m. But because it wasn't just sort of like one weight class that was sort of in that boat, it was most weight classes. So because of that, it wasn't ideal for timing for supper or anything like that, but it was, I consider that a small price to pay.
Yeah, no, not too bad. The only other thing I think that it kind of messed up for me was I felt like in past years I could sort of kind of visit and talk with people and kind of maneuver around a little bit more. And with having to kind of spread out and like, oh, I got to eat and then I got to come back. I feel like it almost I don't feel like I got to talk to as many people as I wanted to,
Right.
because I was always kind of getting ready for the next thing or making sure I was here, or now you're lifting and it's drawn out. So I felt like in years past I could almost just go talk to this person for an hour or two, that person for an hour or two. And it almost seemed like the day wouldn't end. And I just had
Right.
like endless time. And this time I just felt like, there's something next. And it was like the whole day I had to go to get ready for that next thing and the seating arrangements. I just couldn't like bounce around and talk to people as easily as years past, I felt like. So that
Right.
has nothing to do with the competition side of it. That's
Right.
strictly just, hey, wanting to talk to people and meet them and stuff like that, socializing on the side. So, um, but yeah, no, like I said, I think competitive wise, everything was really good. These classes, I mean, really stacked. A lot of people showed up and delivered big weights, a lot of records set. So yeah, let's just kind of jump in here and get rolling with it. For anybody not aware, the events were the double overhand rogue axle, the 3-inch arm assassin strength shop Saxon bar, and a rogue grandfather clock medley, where three different pins, same handle, the Rogue Grandfather clock, but basically you have to lift the pins in ascending order. If you get to the last pin, max reps on that for minute time frame. And yeah, those are the three events. So if we jump in, I'm going to start with the open class, Eric, which took place on Sunday, and give some of the open class lifters some shout outs here. Sierra Powell took first for the women's open and had a perfect score of 300. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a complete blowout, but it also wasn't like super close. There was a little bit of gap. You know what? Actually, I lie about that. They tied on the axle, a couple kilos. It really came down to V bar. So that was a pretty
Right.
close race until V bar. So
And they were similar size women, so that was it was a good battle.
yeah. So if I break down the women's open there, just 1 through 3 there for the podium. Sierra Powell in first, Lindsey Hunes in second, and Rachel Bragg third. Um, Going up to the men's 80 kg for the open, I assume it's Eric Roloff. Um, and almost a perfect score for him. Definitely kind of set himself apart from the pack, but behind him in second and third place was a very close battle. And really all the way down. Almost the rest of that class, almost anybody had a shot at that podium based off
Yeah,
points.
very
But
close. Very close.
if we kind of just hit the top three there, Eric Roloff first, Mark Bruno second, Brandon Bodner third. And like I said, the other two guys in that class were right on the verge. So that was a very tight race all the way around, almost from what, second to fifth place. So
Right. And
that's
Eric got it. Eric Saxon was 10 kilos above body weight, so that's a good body weight ratio lift.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and the only thing, what did he get beat on? The axle? Yeah, he got beat on the axle. So other than that, yeah, basically 5 kilos on the axle is the only thing that stopped him from basically having the sweep. Men's 110 for the open. Very close. 5 points separated first and second place with this. And that was between first place James Orr and second place Daryl Aldridge. And then really another close battle here for third, but Mike Frost took third place. And sorry, I'm just kind of looking at this. But yeah, this class very, very competitive because everybody from the basically the top 7 or 8 people all pulled double digits on the third pin for the vertical lift.
Yeah.
Most of the axles and Saxons were relatively close. Um, and yeah, the points from third down to almost 277 is what Mike Frost had to get third. There was a 276 right behind him, 274.6. So right there, those couple places, I mean, that's
Yeah.
all
Battle
one
for
weight
third.
jump,
Yeah.
one weight jump or one more rep on the V bar or something, and you're talking a whole different thing. And then probably the biggest talk of the open would be Nate Powell. Nate pulled 191.5 kilos on the axle, which I think is like a 420 something, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Yep.
But where he, sorry, where he really shined, and I've competed against Nate. I've seen Nate at a couple competitions. So out of the gate, him getting into the sport, he's had a great Saxon, and that's really his lift. But him bringing his axle up was a huge improvement too, because that axle coming up in combination with his Saxon,
Yeah.
now he's I mean, essentially with those numbers, he pretty much could have just been on the main stage with the other guys. I mean, pulling 420 axle, and I think he pulled the third. Was it the third highest Saxon of the entire competition? I believe he pulled 282 pounds on the Saxon bar, and I think that I'd have to double check it. Sorry. Yeah, that'd be half kilo over what Alexi pulled. So yeah, I think that other than Henry Mullet and Carl Meyersko, Nate Powell had the third highest Saxon out of anybody that competed this weekend. So yeah, basically was just trying to hit on how good Nate Powell's performance was for the Open. Third highest Saxon out of anybody that competed, 282 pounds, and has improved his axle by a lot, pulling in the 420s. So I mean, other than maybe the V bar, I mean Nate should almost be, I'd say next year probably looking at going, main stage or
Absolutely.
jumping up.
He's definitely going to get the invite. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely a good job for Nate lifting there. And if we move on, Eric, I was going to go to the Masters. Do you have the results with you by chance? Just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah. Did you want to kind of just jump in and maybe
Yeah.
start
Sure.
there at kind of 90? I mean, the Masters were basically split into three classes, and there was one solo team that competed, but
Right.
yeah, three Masters divisions.
Yeah. So only two guys in the 90 kg Masters. That was won by Steve Maish. He's, from what I understand, he's a rock climber. And he was well below the weight limit. He was, probably about 175 pounds, and 160 on the axle, 90 on the Saxon, 15 reps on the medley, clean sweep, sort of a dominant win. There are only two men, and with Paul Makarski taking second. And the Masters 110 won once again by Adam Cohen. Super strong.
Very strong.
Very strong, very consistent. He also had a perfect score. 180 axle, 100 Saxon, very strong, respectable numbers. 18 reps on the pin. I don't know can't recall what the weight was, but still.
Yeah.
When you're getting 18, 20 plus reps, you're doing very well. It was sort of a close battle for second and third. Tony King, second place, and Ricardo, the host of the contest, taking third. So it's nice to see. A few years ago there was no Masters category, but now there are enough competitors to make these classes worthwhile. So it's nice to see. And as usual, the biggest class was the 110 plus. And some really large men were among the top three. Ron Paulus was the biggest, but he's actually come down in weight. So he actually weighed in at 195 kilos. But I think he's actually 20 or 30 pounds lighter from Olympia.
Could be.
And then Jason decided to pull the Masters category this year. And Rocky, I think he won last year. He's from Florida. But they were the top three. So Jason was first with a clean sweep. Not a big surprise. He's the reigning North American Open champ, and he's super strong. He stopped lifting on the the pin as soon as he sort of beat the next guy. He just stopped.
Yeah.
No need to exert himself any more than he needs to. Rocky, very strong numbers, and he's very well balanced.
Yeah, no, he's I think I remember first seeing him lift at the 23 Olympia.
Yeah.
And
I think he won that too.
He was impressive there. And anytime I see his name popping up in these Masters classes and stuff, he's definitely one of the top-notch guys.
Yeah. and Big Ron took third in that class with a score of 261. So if you look at the results, there's sort of a there wasn't any super close races, but strong performances overall in that class.
All right. And then, yeah, like from there, man, we could probably just, let's say go into the women's classes here.
Yeah, we'll give Kyler a little
Oh,
shout out.
yeah, yeah. I had that written down. I just actually was
Yeah,
about
so
ready to
this
skip
teen
it.
category, unfortunately, he was the only teen. He's only 15,
Mhm.
and he had a. Did he get it? He got a no, not quite, but he had a very good axle lift, 135, good Saxon bar. But he's only 15. That's what I think. If he keeps maintaining an interest in grip, um, he has the potential to become phenomenal. So it's nice to see him, and he's been hitting the big events. He was at the Worlds, and he's
Okay.
in King Kong. He's doing all the big contests already. So it's really fun to see.
No, yeah, that's really good. I feel like there's been a few times last couple of years that there's always been like one or two teens kind of hanging around, and usually when they show up, they're there for a reason. They're
Yeah,
usually lifting pretty well for their age. So
absolutely.
yeah, hopefully he'll stick with it, and yeah, we'll continue to see him in more competitions. Then 55 kilo women class, would that be
Yep.
the lowest
First,
women's class we're going with? Yeah.
that was the first time that the class was offered at.
Okay, I was gonna say it looked a little different to me. I just happened to look down. I'm like, wait a minute, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's just been a more and more climbers or lighter competitors discovering the sport. And Ricardo, he made it clear that if he gets at least 3 people registered for the class, he'll offer it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so that was nice to see for these women because they're used to competing with women who are, you know, I know 60 kg doesn't look heavy, but when you weigh 50 kg, it is quite a quite a difference, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like anytime you're doing like some of the lighter weight lifts, like let's say hub compared to axle.
Right,
You know that, I mean, 10 pounds on that is just such a greater percentage. So the lower, or even if you're cutting weight,
right,
if you're cutting weight and you weigh 130 pounds and you got to get down to a weight class, it's harder to cut than if a super heavy wants to cut down to 275 or something. It's just,
right,
you have more to work with, or in this case, they have less to work with. So it's like, yeah, when you yeah, like 10 kg as you get down there, 10 kg body weight is massive
right.
percentage of body weight for those women lifting against heavier competitors. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's always nice when they can kind of line up and get relatively, the same weight going. And then that class was won by Amina Alec. And
right. She's part of our club.
yep.
So I drove down with Amina and Corinne. And Emilia was, I knew she'd have a very good chance of winning this class, and she did, but it was a close battle with Anna Wilkins.
Hmm. Yeah, and Anna took second place and ended up winning the grandfather clock medley.
Yep,
And that, I think that's what kind of, I guess to some extent, it was already close, but that kind of, made it a little bit closer than, had it been the other way around there.
yep,
And then Kinsey Tabbert taking third place in that class,
right,
and not not too far off the others, but a little bit of a gap there. But probably newer to the sport versus the other two that are, I'd say the top two there probably have a lot more experience as,
absolutely. Yep,
competitive experience and hands-on what they're lifting and doing. So it's tough jumping into competition early on. Like I said, I don't know if Kinsey's done other stuff, but
I know she had this. Well, she was the smallest woman, and she had the smallest hands. She was worried
okay,
that about even picking up the Saxon empty. But hey, she got 35 kg. That's
okay.
not too shabby. That's as a percentage of her body weight, that's not too bad. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's just tough too. Like if it was a local competition, you might have ran into, uh, I don't know, maybe a couple other newer people to kind of balance it out. But
right,
when you're getting that class split and there's only three in it, and everybody there's already done this numerous times, and they're at a, you know what I mean? They're just more experienced, have kind of been in the game.
right,
It's a tall order to go in and just instantly be competitive, unless you just have big background in something else, or you're just really
right.
kind of a natural at it. So yeah, that would take care of the 55 kg class. Um, Going up to 60 kg. Or do you guys go by Team Ottawa? Is that what it is?
That's what we've been calling ourselves. Yeah, team model.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another member, correct?
Yeah.
Taking first place here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect score. Yeah.
300. And I don't want to mess up. Is it Corinne or Corrine? How'd you say it?
Corinne.
Corinne. Okay. So Corinne Lalonde. Okay. Yeah. See, I got a chance to meet her and talk with her briefly at one of when we were in room A120. I got to speak with her a little bit.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, she's also, I mean, I know here a lot of these women are lifted in this class, but I believe some of the women on the list were able, if hypothetically there were a master's, she is a
Yeah.
master's lifter.
She's the reigning world masters. She won in
Yeah.
Olympia. She won.
Yeah.
She won the 60 kg and the Masters in Vegas in October.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought. So I don't know if it was just a matter of not enough masters competitors or just didn't feel like doing a masters thing and just wanted to lift with the open and whatever. But yeah, so she took first place there with a clean sweep. Taylor Kraus in second place, and third place Grace Van Hoy.
Super competitive. They all tight on the axle. I mean, that's a nice
Yes.
way to start off a contest.
No, yeah, for sure. Because I mean, you want to kind of get the edge, starting off early, get a little bit of momentum going. That way, if something bad happens later on in the competition, maybe you have a little bit of a cushion in the standings. But
Right.
when everybody ties, you're going into that second event like, man, I gotta, you know, you got to do something at that point because any weight jump can then sway, everything going into that last event when you tie
Yeah.
the first one like that. So definitely a good thing to point out there. And then going 70 kg, Tammy McClure won that. I would almost say, yeah, not really a close race on this one. I mean, she's kind of in a league of her own,
Right.
but between second, third, and fourth place, they were all pretty close. Had some of those other events gone a different jump or one more rep, um,
Yep.
that podium could look different. Everything below basically two, three, and four.
Yep.
Um, with Tammy being in first, I think probably the biggest thing to talk about, aside from getting into the, sorry, I'm just trying to double check this. Yeah, other than Sarah Chapello that we'll talk about later. Um, I believe Tammy pulled the second highest Saxon bar of the day with
Yep.
71 and a half kilos.
Yep.
But the big story is going to be the axle because she had definitely, cut some weight, got lower because one of her goals for a while has been to pull double body weight on the axle. And she
Right.
was able to do that. She weighed in just under 61 kilos and she was able to land a good lift of 125 kilos or 275 pounds. Um, so I think that was probably one of the bigger moments for
First,
the,
I believe, first woman to ever do it. So yeah, it was a big deal.
yeah.
Um, when she was trying to lose a few pounds on the Thursday night, I was wondering if it was to get in the lower weight class to win yet another weight class. But no,
Yeah.
he said it was all about the improving your odds and doing the double weight axle. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah. So that was definitely a good moment to catch. And like I said, going down from there, second place, Ashley Sterling, and third place, Hannah O'Connor.
And
Um,
Ashley was in third before the last event, but she had a great run on the GFC
mhm.
at least. So that's where she went from third to second. So it was another exciting battle. Hannah,
Yeah.
I understand, is also a climber.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not too much experience in grip yet, but super strong.
Yeah. Well, we've seen that. I mean, we've seen that on both sides because there's gonna be a few cases of that on the men's side as well.
Right.
But I feel like especially with these lighter weight women's classes, I feel like there's just been this big influx of climbers, and we just kind of keep seeing it pop up. Um, I don't know. Maybe the women climbers are just more into jumping into some of these competitions, or maybe the guys aren't recruiting the climbers on their end as well. But I feel like we see more lighter weight women's climbers kind of jumping in at a
Yep.
faster rate than on the men's side of climbing type stuff. Um, and then going up 80 kilos, well, not up 80 kilos, but 80 kg class. Helen Wynn, um, with almost a clean sweep outside of Danielle Evanson, who took second, beating her by 4 reps on the grandfather clock rep out. Um, so Helen still scored 296 points, so almost a perfect 300, but Danielle was able to get her on that one event.
Right.
And then close battle between Jennifer Gallagher and Sarah Saffel, but Sarah Saffel was able to pull that third place off. So for the 80 kg women going down, had Helen, Danielle Evanson, and Sarah Saffel.
Helen and Danielle they're just so strong.
Yeah.
And Helen is super consistent. Like those are big numbers. 125, 70, 22. Her and I know they're in different classes, but Helen and Tammy, very, very close lifts. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing happened in Los Angeles. Extremely close.
Well, didn't they tie on every event except for going into the last one? Like
Yeah.
they tied like 3 events and then
Yeah,
literally had to go to the 4th, right?
Right. So same deal here. The only difference is Helen did 2 fewer reps on the GFC, and I don't even know if that was the same weight or not.
Yeah, because of the weight class. Yeah,
so
difference.
I mean, there's so many super strong women now, and Danielle, I knew she would have a good run at the GFC medley. I think she had the most reps. Did she have the most reps among all the women?
It appears so.
Yeah, and same thing happened last year, I believe. She beat Tammy on the reps last year on this event too. So
yeah, because I'm not sure about if the weight differences between if they
Right.
loaded the pins different, but yeah, if we're going off straight rep count, yeah, she had the most reps.
yeah, so very it's just fun to see so many strong competitors in one location. So yeah,
these classes I think are about the best they've ever been.
Right.
I mean, as far as like I said, the women's side, just being able to fill these kind of rosters out, and then
yeah,
kind of seeing how it all plays out, it's pretty close. And 90 kg, which is kind of a newer class that I think is also from this kind of I guess the growth in the women participation or whatever we've seen here lately. But 90 kg has been able to kind of be a new class that I feel like a lot of times they would just jump like 80, 100, 100 plus.
right.
And that was kind of the norm for a long time. And now you're starting to see things like the introduction of the 55 kg class, if it's possible. The 90 kg has been contested a couple times now. So Haley Gow had a clean sweep there, 300 points, and took the win on all events. For me, like I said, I'm not super familiar. I mean, obviously I've seen Haley lift numerous times. I'm not super familiar with everybody's numbers though and what their PRs are.
I have to think these are PRs. I mean, 125, 275. The number of women who,
yeah,
I mean, these are good lifts. So I think she showed up in her best form ever.
well, I was gonna say she looked physically, she looked like she had packed on a little bit more muscle
Right.
than in the past. She just looked more muscular. And on Axel, I felt like at the like you're mentioning, once you get to that like 250, 260, 270 range, I just felt like she was moving the weights a lot easier than in the past. Like I said, now I'm going off of memory, and half the
I
time
think so
I'm talking,
too.
not paying
I think so
attention.
too.
But yeah, it looked like she was probably the strongest she's ever been, or have to be pretty close. I mean, so yeah, she did a very good job there. Second and third place would be Alicia Martin, and then hopefully I messes up. Cian Cooper. Hopefully
Yeah,
it's not Cyan.
I think it's pronounced Sean.
Oh, okay. That's me being an idiot.
She's from Australia.
Okay.
She's from Australia. And if you look at those three, 115, 120, 125, that's a strong group.
Strong axles.
On the axle, yeah.
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 And then actually, well, Haley and Alicia tied on the Saxon bar.
Yep.
And then they were only a couple reps off on the medley. So really that axle pull that I mentioned earlier from Haley kind of is what really kind of, I guess, gave the edge or, gave the biggest gap there.
Yep.
All right. And then this is where I guess it would be a little bit different. Because like I said, normally it would be 100 and 100 plus in the past, but this was just 90 plus. So it was just everybody grouped together that was overnight.
Yeah, and I know that wasn't announced. So some of the women weren't too thrilled to learn that. They basically learned it when the contest was sort of ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
So I know they weren't super impressed, but in the end, it made for a very entertaining class, very strong class. Um, and to me, the big surprise was newcomer Jaquise Robertson, who
Yeah,
had an axle of, I don't know exactly what that works out to, but I think it's a 300
300,
pound.
300 pounds. Yeah, it's 300 on the dot pretty much, maybe just slightly over, but yeah, 300-pound axle.
I mean, for someone to come out of basically nowhere and to lift that on the Arnold stage, I thought that was really cool.
No, really big lift. Yeah, and I guess I wasn't sure because sometimes these, like we talked about, numerous weight classes will lift together, but the standings are still separate.
Right.
In this case, I mean, a lot of these women were on the same stage, maybe thinking these were numerous classes and they were all in the same one there. So yeah, I didn't know who was really in what class, but
Right.
I knew that axle was going to be a big deal. And then seeing how everything else played out, made for a bit of a more entertaining
Yeah, because that
competition.
Sarah's axle lift was a little down
Hmm.
from her usual numbers, so that made the class very exciting right from the start. Um, yeah, but then she made up a lot of ground on taking the top Saxon lift,
Yeah.
and Jaquise, though 62.5 is a very good lift. It's she still gave up a lot of points to Sarah on that event.
Yeah, and Sarah, I mean, despite maybe the axle being down, she still pulled the highest Saxon out of
Yep.
any women's competitor,
Right.
um, which was just slightly more than Helen and Tammy did, but it was still about 4 or 5 kilos above everybody else. So she still managed to pull off a pretty good Saxon there.
Yeah.
Um, and Jen Tibbenham took third, but was one rep off of Sarah in the medley. Now, I don't know if Sarah stopped after 12, just, kind of like Dingy did in the,
Right.
I don't know if that was like, oh, I hit the right number, doesn't matter. Or was that close to, because I know she's so strong at V-bar that I just feel like that might have been, she just knew what she had to hit. So she hit one above and then just
It's
called it.
it's possible. I'm not sure. I can't
Yeah.
recall, but I do remember that Jen, if you look at that last event, um, that launched her from, I don't know if she was in fourth or fifth going in. I think she was in fifth, and she had such a good performance on the GFC um, that she got to third. So she was, I was really happy for her because she was also she would have been in the 100 kg class. So she was outside of a medal, and now she ended up getting a medal in that
Hmm.
combined class, largely because of her performance on that last event. So I thought that was a pretty cool way to wrap up the contest.
Yeah. So, I guess going from that, we would have Sarah Chapelot taking the win overall. Um, Jaquise, hopefully I'm saying that right.
That's how I've been saying it. I think
Jaquise. I
that's
don't
how
know.
they've been
Yeah,
saying it too.
I think I was saying Jaquise the whole time I was there, so I don't know. Jaquise.
Yeah.
Hopefully, one of those two will be right. Robertson took second place. Jen Tibbenham, as we just spoke about, taking the bronze there, and I guess I messed up earlier saying that some of I guess there is a Masters women's here. I did at the
Right.
bottom of
Yeah.
this spreadsheet, so I messed that up earlier saying that maybe they didn't have enough for a Masters, and that's why like Corinne and some people who were just doing the Open, but um, there was a Masters women's class. So yeah, sorry, I'm on the fly trying to.
From what I think what happened is had it been contested in separate at a separate time, Corinne would have done both. But because it was all at the same time,
Yeah,
I think you can't have a single lift count for two categories.
yeah,
So
makes sense.
so that's why she was in the Masters.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But in my head, for some reason, I guess when I was printing these spreadsheets out and stuff, I just didn't see a women's masters division. And it just, is at the bottom of the women's thing, kind
Right.
of tucked away. So I kind of, I guess, misspoke earlier. Um, and if we go there, clean sweep for Nita Vargo.
Yep.
And are you familiar with her lifting at all, Eric? Or
Yeah, I think
okay.
she was at the Olympia too, and
Mhm.
I think she's from Washington. Um, so just very strong overall. As you can see, she has a very. I think that would have been competitive in the open class for. I'm not sure. Yeah, she would have been able at least to hold her own in the
Yeah.
in the 90 plus kg.
And then Joanna Hall, second.
Yep.
And oh man, Eric, I'm gonna put this one on you. What about third?
I think Terry Van de Vecti. That's what they were saying.
Okay. Yeah, see, you knew that off memory. I was probably talking too much in the crowd or something and didn't know. I probably didn't even hear it, so I didn't even have that to go off of for reference.
I
So
think she was. Yeah, she
yeah.
discovered the sport at the home gym contest last year in Indiana,
Mhm.
and that's where she met Tammy. And so that gave her an interesting grip. And next thing you know, she's at the Arnold's.
Yeah, and that was I don't know. I mean, I feel like one, two, and three there were separated. They're pretty close, but still kind of, separated by at least
Yep.
a decent jump, or a couple reps per thing.
Yep.
They did have pretty close axles though.
Yep.
With the 110 by Anita and then Joanna and Terry hitting 105 and tying there. So that kind of makes that interesting going forward and still
Yep.
close on Saxon. So,
And I know some
um,
of these women are in their 60s, so those are big weights for.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it makes it good to see.
Yeah.
And then so just kind of burning through this without, taking too much time, but still want to give credit and kind of point out key moments. 70 kg. It's tough for me because, like I said, I don't know everybody's PRs or what their goals are as they're coming into these things. But I've spoke with William Reed online before, but I haven't had a chance to meet him in person. Got to meet him in person. He didn't seem like he was too thrilled with his lifts overall, but I mean, super dominating. I mean, not dominating performance, but
Yeah.
at the same time, just because you're outlifting other people, a lot of times people go to these competitions and it's kind of you versus you. So
Yeah.
I think he was maybe a little disappointed and this is just what I picked up from talking to him. Felt like he was maybe he underperformed to the standards he had set, but still did more than enough to walk away with the 70 kg win. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
No.
repeat that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is. Is maybe he was hoping to lift even more, even though it was more than enough to seal the victory.
Yeah.
I mean, like he had a clear victory. When you win by 52 points, you're doing well. 31 reps. I think that was more reps than any. Yeah, that was the most reps among any man on the day. So very, very strong.
Yeah, and then I think for some reason they have this out of place because if you go to the placing,
Yeah,
second's
Austin
really
took
third,
second.
right? So
Yeah,
Austin Connolly took second place in that class, and that was a pretty close battle with Jacob Carter, who took third.
yeah.
Um,
The GFC medley is what put him over. Yeah,
yeah, because it was one rep to 10. So,
yeah,
and yeah, and he had well, he was up 5 kilos on the axle, dropped Saxon, and then yeah, that sealed the deal though for the vertical
yeah,
lift there at the end.
yeah,
And Jay Ripley wasn't far off because he had 246 points and
yep,
Jacob had 248, to seal the bronze there. So I mean that's a couple points right away from the podium. So
right.
close again, beyond years past, we've just seen, one or two rock stars, or you see like one person in a class run away with it. And then a lot of the other people below aren't really competitive with one another either. So it kind of makes the class just, even if there is one person like Will that wins by almost 50 points, if second and third are having a good battle, I think it still keeps things a little bit more fun,
Yep.
that second, third, and fourth. So, um, yeah, that's just always good to see, in my opinion. Um, 80 kg men's class. Um, I want to say a lot of other people were more familiar with him. I am not a climber, so I apologize if I don't know Emil,
Mhm.
but other people there knew who he was, and uh, you know, apparently is pretty well known in the climbing world and has jumped into this, the grip stuff and trying to see what he can do with that. I want to say
We
the
should
biggest lift. Oh, sorry, Eric, go ahead. Yeah.
probably just announce that for all the men up to 110, we did these events out of order from the rest of the group. We actually started with the Saxon
Yeah.
and then did the Rogue. So just context for anyone listening.
Yeah, we started with all these classes that were naming 70 to 110.
Yeah.
So 154 pounds up to 242 pounds. Those weight classes. Yeah, basically started the Saxon like 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m., and then didn't get to do the grandfather clock medley until probably 7 p.m. or
Right.
something, I think, or a little bit after.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the long Saturday I was talking about kind of in the intro. But yeah, but all people, 70 to 110 had the same, roughly the same wait times and all that. So like you said, it was pretty much even playing field for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, Emil comes from a pretty strong climbing background, I believe, from what I was told. Had a clean sweep in his class. I think the biggest lift of that class, or kind of the talk of that, would be the fact that he did 108.5 kilos on the Saxon bar,
Yeah.
which
Huge lift.
that's a monster lift. Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
that's 230 some pounds. Um, what's that
as a
come?
high level climber, I was expecting that would be probably one of his strong lifts.
239. So yeah, just over 239 pounds.
Right.
And that is, I mean, way over body weight. If we want to bring body weight into the
Right.
discussion, um, that's
His
that's major. Yeah.
his axle. I think his watching him on the axle, his back was the limiting factor. I think he probably felt something, and he's probably saying, "I should probably stop at this point." I don't know that he's used to lifting super heavy weights off the ground like that. Most climbers are not.
Yeah.
But I was talking to him after, and I know his one-handed lifts, thick bar lifts, are very, very, very good. So I think it's just a back issue at this point. It won't be long. If he decides to train for it, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets, 180 plus on the axle before long. And on under 80 kg body weight, that's mighty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. And then second and third was actually pretty close up until the vertical lift.
Yeah, Steve is really good at those vertical lifts.
Yes.
Almost had as many reps as Emil, 19. So very respectable performance. And he was the lightest competitor. He was, as you see, he only weighed 72.
Yeah.
I think he probably had an arrangement with Will. They each do one class.
Could
That's
be.
my impression.
Yeah.
And I know Will has been motivated to get into this class and try to raise records and set records. So I think that's probably what happened there.
No, for sure. And yeah, so that between Steve Gasper and Thomas Gratton, Steve got him by 5 kilos on the axle, and then Thomas was up 2.5 kilos on the Saxon. So pretty even going into that last event. But then, yeah, Steve kind of just took off with it and kind of sealed the deal. But up until that point, close race.
Yep.
And then I'm gonna have you give your thoughts because you cut down to 90 kilos, and Devin Lee Brown has also been. I mean, we've seen him anywhere from maybe 90 to 100-ish kilos, but he's also, I think, not too long ago was down at 80. Whether he was, cutting for arm wrestling or wanting to raise some 80-kilo records for arm lifting, but Devin Lee had cut down to 80. So maybe there was a question mark whether he was going to be 80, 90, or where he'd end up. How did you feel cutting to 90? And maybe what was your thought process, I guess, cutting to 90 and then how the class played out?
Yeah. So I don't know that I've ever seen Devin Lee in 100. If he was in 100, it's because it wasn't a 90. Because I don't think I've ever seen him compete.
Not that heavy.
I don't think I've ever seen him compete above a body weight of 90 kg. But
okay, I didn't know because I feel like King Kong maybe had been like I'm talking like 93 if we talk like on the GC.
Yeah.
So maybe about 205, but
right, yeah.
But yeah, I got you. But yeah,
because he's always
about
he's
200
always
or
a
lower.
lean guy. He's never he doesn't have much excess weight on him. Very and last year he surprised everyone by cutting down to the 80 and winning that. This year, I wanted to lose a bit of body fat, so I've been sort of changing my the way I eat since Christmas about. So I was about 210, 211 a week out, and I'd planned to do a water cut to get to 90. So that was one reason, is that I was losing weight anyway. The other reason is last year, Ivan beat me in the 100 kg, and I figured this guy's 21, or he was 21 last year, and he has a lot more room to grow. Chances are he's going to get more room to grow stronger over the course of the year than I am at my age. So I figured, you know what, I'll I'll abandon the 100 this year and try my luck in the 90. Definitely showed up in the 90. I was sort of expecting he would. But to get on the weight cut, the water cut, it's never fun. But I did cut 13 pounds. It was not never pleasant, but I do it as scientifically as I can. So so the last day is not too bad. But I made it. I expected that I would likely win the Rogue by a bit, and that I would likely win the Saxon by a bit. And I knew Devin would beat me on the third event, but I thought, it should be very close. We started with the Saxon. I was happy with my lift. I came close to getting the next. I got 115. I came close to the 117.5, and I know I should get that sometime soon.
Yeah.
Devin Lee had a great lift. He was right behind with 112.5, so I didn't have that build up that much of a lead. And then
and that's a 90 kilo record as well,
right?
Because up until that point, John Fulber and Tanner Merkel had the record at 110 kilos.
Okay.
So this you hitting that lift at 115 kilos or 253 pounds, that actually jumped the 90 kg men's Saxon record up essentially 11 pounds.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
The Rogue axle. So I lifted 422 or whatever it was, 191.5, and my back, I just felt I wasn't gonna get. I didn't get the next one, but Devin Lee had like a 35 plus pound PR. Like I don't think he'd ever done more than. He never had a 400 axle in a contest.
Yeah, well,
and
then
then
I was speaking to somebody about that because they said that they felt like Devin Lee gets underestimated sometimes, and I said, I don't think Devin Lee really gets underestimated. I just said for the last 2 or 3 years, he's never pulled over 400 pounds on the axle.
Right.
And he really hadn't broke into the 230s on Saxon yet. But
right.
I think one of the things that if anybody's been paying attention that they'll notice is that, and not that just because you're posting online, it means that you weren't training hard before, or whatever the case may be, or, however people want to look at that. But I feel like we've seen Devin Lee pick up in the amount of competitions he's done, the amount of grip stuff that's been posted. And if anybody knows what they're doing from, being a competitor in the sport, there were times in the past where he would typically fall off around the 220-pound mark for Saxon, but the grip might be wide and he really wasn't in an optimal position. I don't know how serious he was training it. You know what I mean? This year, one of the things I noticed in person was a lot of his grips, stances, everything else was different. There was a lot more, training posts leading up to the competition. And I think that really, the best conclusion I can draw is that he probably didn't have to train quite as hard in the past or was choosing not to, or had other things, maybe arm wrestling and other endeavors he was doing. And this year, I think what we've started to see is him start to specialize and focus a little bit more on his technique and actively start training some of these things. And now you are starting to see,
Right.
the big PRs kind of strike and hit right now, because it's like, I don't think he was all in the last
Right.
couple of years. That was just, showing up kind of as is with a little bit of training. And now I think that he's probably putting in a little bit more time than he ever has, or he's probably recovered from maybe doing some of the other stuff a little less. And that's what I would say. Like I said, I don't talk to Devin Lee a ton. I don't know him personally that well, but visually watching it, the grip on Saxon was moved in, stances were changed, and like I said, the numbers are up, and I'm just seeing more frequency of posting about grip. So
Right.
I assume he just, took it a little more serious and didn't have other side missions going on.
So, for someone to have that much of a PR on the axle, and as you said, the Saxon as well, it surprised me. And so I wasn't, I tried my best on the GFC medley, but I can tell sort of pretty early. I can tell it didn't feel as grippy as I was maybe hoping. So I think I had to switch hands after my 5th rep, where I think he probably got to 15 or 20 before even switching hands. So
yeah. And V-Bar is, he's pretty well rounded at most things, especially considering, some of these new PRs and some of these new things that he's worked on. but V-bar, regardless, he's always pulled
Yeah.
ridiculous V-bar. So it's hard going into that last event knowing that, man, he just surprised me on Axel.
Right.
Oh, now we got this, rep out on a V-bar, which is kind of like his thing, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, tough
Anyway,
class. Yeah.
so he won that class. I wasn't too far behind, and I was happy. Although I didn't win, I was happy at least to have to make him work for it. So, I think it's not like I made him any mistakes. I lifted sort of what I expected to lift, and he was just stronger on the day. So I tip my hat to him. He had a great performance. And yeah, that was, I think we had the biggest class, possibly the biggest class of the contest with 11
Yeah.
guys. And Nate Phillips, who's only been doing this less than a year, a very respectable third place. So yeah, he's got tons of potential.
Yeah, he got you by a rep
On the
on
last one,
the
yeah.
on the medley, and I told him I told him too. I said, "Hey Nate, good job." I said because it's not like Eric wasn't trying. Because considering where you and Devin Lee were, I was like, Eric's given this medley is all. It's not like, oh, we already know how the placing is, so maybe he's coasting. I'm like, no, yeah, I would say that would probably be a legit win. Where sometimes you might pull more reps than somebody or lift a heavier weight, but it doesn't tell the full tale. But I think that was good. I mean, Nate's another guy that is early on pretty natural coming into V-bar. Vertical lifts seem to be a thing. I think he lifted pretty big on the Rogue Anvil we saw at the
Yep.
Olympia. And
Yep.
this, so I think it was good for him to, good lifts on the other two. But you and Devin Lee, like I said, it's a tall order your first year. You guys have been doing this for a while and at a
Right.
high level. But I think it was good for him to kind of build maybe a little bit of confidence and kind of at least be in the running on one event. That way it wasn't like, oh man, I lifted 6 reps and those guys are in the 20s.
Yeah.
It's always
And,
nice to get in there with more
and
experienced people and hold your own.
and if you look down the list, there's a few guys who were really good at that last event, like Luke O'Connor, Stanley Hamilton.
Yes.
Those are
Yeah.
great results.
I was familiar with Stanley Hamilton. I know he arm wrestles, but I've seen a lot of V-bar lifts from him. That seems to be one of the things that he really kind of specializes in and like thrives at.
Right.
So I figured Stanley would be really good at the vertical lift. And yeah, I guess another thing to mention for your guys' class, not only almost being like the most depth to it as far as just number of people, but if you go from Nick Mann's in fourth place almost all the way down to Matt McCall in ninth.
Very close.
That
Yeah.
fourth through nine was really like anybody's game. And
Yep.
that's a huge stack of lifters there just out of the top three. I mean, you, Devin Lee, and Nate pretty much sealed up third. I think Nick had a shot at third until that medley, and Nate
Yeah.
just took off with it. But everybody else under that, man, I mean, 4 through 9 could have almost been shuffled any way, any way possible. So definitely a deep class and a lot of people roughly of the same kind of caliber and strength there. So
Yep.
yeah.
Then we move on to another interesting class, the 100s.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, 100 kg. I cut to 100 kg, so I actually, I was in this class and I wasn't sure who was going to show up or do what. We don't really know the rosters until we get there.
Right.
And I now this is just speaking off the past. You would probably agree with this. Generally, the 100 kilo class would typically be a little bit more stacked, and sometimes 110 was actually the weaker, easier division, roughly, depending on who showed up. But if
Right.
you looked at the numbers, a lot of times the 100 kilo guys would be beating the 110 kilo guys, at podium for podium almost, if you were to line their numbers up. This year,
Right.
not the case, or not fully the case, or it would have been really close. I mean, God, there's 110 was stacked. I think that this might be one of the first years where you could almost say that 110 actually had more depth overall than the 100 kg class. It was a
This year.
serious class.
This year, yeah.
It was a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't regret cutting to 100, but yeah, I did make that cut. I knew that going to 100, there was the potential to face Yvonne, you, Cliff Keener, Maybe guys from the past like Jake Fuller. I just knew there was other names that could be popping up that were
Right.
very respectable and you know just good at these lifts. These aren't lifts that I'm necessarily known for. Um, I'm not necessarily known as a big axle guy. Saxon, I'm competitive, but I'm not setting the world on fire, and I don't really even care for V bar at all. Um, Not terrible at it, but it's not like I'm excited when I see it on the lineup.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I kind of didn't know who was going to be popping up at 110, and I even thinking that the 100 class might be more stacked. I kind of thought I'd rather kind of go down there and kind of drop in a little bit of body weight. I had dropped a little bit of body weight for the worldwide grip battle that
Hmm.
Jed put on, so my body weight was already at that like I guess you would say 230-ish mark. But I found my body weight kind of dropping a little bit after that. So I was down like 228, 227 almost a week out. And I was kind of like, if I just tighten up on my diet and do maybe a small water cut or something, I could
Yep.
easily make 100. Why not? And it kind of gave me something else to focus on too that last week when I'm really trying to let my body recover because I can't lift. I'm not doing anything like physically taxing. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll just kind of, instead of train, I'll focus on cutting weight,
Right.
and drop that last 7 pounds or so. Um, but yeah, I didn't know who I was going to face really. And wasn't sure how 110 would shape up, but um, I did anticipate Cliff. And if you were to stay in that class, I thought you and Cliff would be the people to beat on Axel. Yvonne was sort of a question mark for me on Axel. I wasn't sure. I've seen some, decent training videos where he's pulled pretty good Axel. We have last year's numbers to go off of. Um, and I know he had pulled out and got sick from the World's Strongest Grip competition. So yeah,
Hmm.
I didn't know. I didn't really know what to expect from him on Axel, but I had a little bit of information to go off of. Um, Saxon, I knew Yvonne was probably going to destroy most people. I've seen some of his training lifts and others, and in training's not always what happens on the day. We find that out sometimes, right? Um, but Saxon, I mean, I've seen him pull, 270, 280 and pretty smooth in training. So I was like, yeah, there's just no way I'm going to make that ground up, 30, 40 pounds or something.
Yep.
But yeah, so I guess if we go in order as kind of things unfolded, we started with Saxon. Yvonne basically went up to 120 kilos. I think that's 264 pounds or right there,
Yep.
just about. He looked like he pulled it pretty easy, and I think he just was happy with the gap that he started off. He had a 10-kilo lead over me. I took second in that event. Cliff was right behind me in third place for that event. And then Dylan, and I don't want to mess up the last name. I believe it's like Hey Bear. Is
Hmm.
that right?
I think so.
Or close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dylan was right behind Cliff, 2.5 kilos on that. Um, and then yeah, it kind of tapered off a little bit from there. And then, like you said, we did the Rogue Axle second. This is where things got shook up a little bit because Cliff did deliver. I mean, Cliff pulled a big lift, 196.5 kilos.
Yeah.
And I think that comes out to like 433.
Hmm.
So yeah, Cliff pulled a 433-pound axle, which didn't surprise me because I watched him essentially do the same thing back in December at a competition.
Right.
I That's the funny thing. I guess being back in Ohio now, Nate Phillips held a competition, so I was lifting against everybody else that showed up. But I was lifting against like Jason Dingy and Cliff Keener there. Jason had hosted King Kong, so I lifted against Cliff there. At the Olympian 23, me and Cliff and you were in the same class, so we were all
Right.
lifting at 100. So me and Cliff have just constantly been like bumping into each other like every competition it seems like. So um, him pulling 430s on Axel didn't surprise me because he just beasted a lift back in December the same way. Um, really, I don't know, really impressive. So yeah, Axel, he's just so strong. For me, I was kind of playing it based off of a couple other guys' jumps. And I don't even know if they were aware that I was in their class, but I'm aware of who's in my class and who's doing what. And I mean, we're competing. I'm paying attention to every jump you make. And if I can make you lift first or make you go first and miss, then jump in and boom, secure that win, then I get, more room to play with later. So
Yeah.
I'm always like very aware of what's going on and very like analytical and strategic. So I don't even know with, the 70, 80, 90, 100, 110s all on stage, I think some guys were just unsure of who they were even lifting against.
Right.
There's just so many
Yep.
bodies up there. But I knew who was in my class, so every time they take an attempt, I'm playing the game. Like we're the only ones in the room, basically.
Right.
Um, so I knew, I believe it was maybe when Dylan went up, and because Dylan was right behind Cliff, and I just had to kind of watch him on Axel. I ended up pulling 181 and a half kilos, which is 400 pounds. Um, but when he missed the next jump, I think it was a jump up to 176 kilos that he missed. I instantly went up and just took that.
Right.
Um, just to make sure that, okay, I got something on the board. And then I was debating on taking the next jump up to 393. I think that was going to be the next jump. And then Ricardo was talking about time running out. The next jump's going straight up to basically 181 and a half, 400. And I was like, man, okay. Wasn't really, that was kind of the goal I had set for myself, was to hit a 400 axle. Um, and yeah, I ended up hitting it. It moved pretty well, actually. And then Yvonne, I think, skipped on that attempt and
Yeah, he
tried to
did.
go.
Yeah.
He tried to go up above me, which
Yeah.
I'm not going to mess him. I was going to say that's a mistake. He should know better than that. But I'm not even going to mess with Yvonne right now on it. But but yeah, he went up to whatever that next jump was. Maybe it was 407, maybe it was 410. I don't really know what the next jump was.
Yeah, I think 411, but I think he would have been pretty confident given last year he lifted 433, right? So he probably figured
Yeah,
it's safe for me to jump, but
for sure.
it just wasn't happening on that day.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like, sometimes, for a lot of these multi-venue things and a lot of these people, if you're not in the room on the same day, you're not dealing with the same conditions, or you're not going through the same thing as everybody else, or you're not on someone else's clock, it's tough to really know what would happen.
Right.
We all have this theory. It's like it's easy to sit on the couch and say, I could have done that, or, oh, I lift this. But I mean, this is a good example of, why you got to show up and why you got to do it. Because I mean, in my head, I thought I had no chance at uh, anything above third, just because I thought Yvonne and Cliff were going to stomp me on Axel. I thought maybe I could beat Cliff on Saxon, which I did, but I thought Yvonne was going to be so high on, Saxon, that wasn't even going to be close. And yeah, when he kind of dropped that, I was like, man, this is a good reminder of, why you show up and why you, why in person is a good thing to do.
Yep.
It just unfolds. We could always hypothesize off of what happens on paper and what so and so did last year, but yeah, you just don't know how things are going to shake up. And so that was a good lift there. And then a lot of different people too, like Jack Palmer came up and actually pulled more than Dylan, and then Ben, I believe it would be Eisenmenger,
Yep.
tied me at 400 pounds on axle. So even though these guys didn't make the top three there, they were still shaking up the points and getting in between some people as well.
Yep.
So big lifts there, being competitive. And then we went to the medley, and Cliff and Dylan tied with 15 reps and tied for the win there. Yvonne hit 12, I hit 10, and that pretty much sealed that top three, with Cliff Keener taking the gold, which really was, I mean, well deserved. Cliff has been competing a lot and performing really well lately. So I was happy seeing Cliff. Like I said, we've competed a lot together recently. I was happy to see Cliff pull those lifts off and hit some PRs and put it all together for a gold. Because I
Yep.
feel like he's always that guy that last few years, like the Olympia that year, he took second to you. He's so strong. He's in the running. But for him to take gold, I think it was well earned. Yvonne sealed the deal with second. I came in third. Then we can jump up to 110. I don't know. Did you have anything else to add, 100 there, Eric? Anything you saw or?
No more. Aside from, I was very happy for you to basically hit the numbers you were hoping to hit overall, and like 400 axle. It's always nice to get a barrier like that, a milestone lift. And
yeah, no, it was, man, because that was kind of the goal. Like, I mean, obviously Saxon, I just want to lift whatever. I was hoping for something 240s, 250-ish.
Right.
And it landed, but yeah, that's still technically my biggest Saxon pull, and especially in competition. So that was good. And then the 400 axle, really, I'm glad that we kind of were running out of time and they, hey, we're going to take this bigger
Right.
jump because I might not have taken that jump and
Yeah.
I might have pulled like 393 and just called it a day. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that we were running short on time and that jump got pushed higher because I just had to kind of dig deep and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
either it's coming up or it doesn't. I had to get my mind right and focus on it. But yeah, like I said, it moved pretty well. It didn't honestly it didn't feel much different than 382, the
Right.
lift I pulled before. It didn't move or feel much different. But I think mentally I kind of had to put myself in a different place to
Right.
make it feel like 382. Um, but uh, but yeah, no, that yeah, I said good competition, man. And 100 kg was still pretty stacked. But I think the 110s were just a little bit bigger and stronger this year than what we have seen in the past.
And interesting because it was sort of competitors, international competitors that we
Yeah,
we we have
all
we haven't
over.
seen before at the Arnold's, or I'd
Yeah.
never seen most of these at all. So
No.
for them to
Yeah.
do so well, it was very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. It was man, Marcus Manick. I hope I'm like I said, I hope I'm not messing up any pronunciation there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcus Manick, man, just
He's a
well,
beast.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
he's a monster. Yeah. So I mean he started the day off good because like I said, we started with Saxon. So he started off good, but then Sebastian and Vasilios, I hope I'm saying that
Yeah.
right. Vasilios Lechos.
Yeah.
Um, they came in and got him back on Axel.
Yeah.
So it really did come down to the wire for that class because Marcus still pulled off the sweep with 300 points, but the guys behind him were 292 and 291. I mean, that's razor close for a top three podium. That's probably the closest podium we had, I would say.
Yeah. I'm actually just looking at the points here. I guess there's a little error in the points
Uh-oh.
because he doesn't have a clean sweep, right? Because he actually got third on the axle.
Well, yeah, well, yeah. So yeah, that is messed up. I literally just contradicted myself, but I'm reading off
Yeah.
the sheet and not using logic.
No, so there's a little error. I don't think it affected the standings,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah. So Marcus, I think was it Latvia or Lithuania? It's one of those two. I forget which one it was though.
man, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not.
Yeah.
I knew that, like I said, I knew that class had some strong international lifters, but as
But
far as where they
just
were all from, not
he
sure.
just looked to be like strong. Like you looked at him and you're like, this guy's looks hard.
Yeah,
You look Sebastian from France. Him, it was the opposite. He was way stronger than what you would think just from looking at him. He,
yeah, no,
he
yeah,
baggy shirt. He's I think he's carrying a bit of extra weight, but he was strong. And Vasilios from Greece,
Greece.
also another thick-looking young guy. I mean, it was a very
He wasn't far off of 100 kilos. That's something interesting to bring up too. I mean, he weighed 103,
right.
but he's pretty much second lightest guy other than Sam
Yeah,
there. Yeah, he's basically, I mean, a pretty deep class. He was second lightest competitor.
yeah,
Not much over 220 pounds really. So,
yeah,
but
but
yeah, that class, it was super close up at the top, a little bit of a gap for fourth there,
yeah,
but then I believe it would be fifth almost down to wherever Zach Stanowitz placed. But I mean, you had so many like
yeah,
strong guys in there. But yeah, that once again, another cluster of like four people down around like fifth through eighth or fourth through eighth that
yeah,
they said, like I said, you could shuffle that deck almost any way. Any day, any of those guys could almost swap positions. So 110 was real exciting. It was cool to watch because like typically we're grouped in classes, 80, 90, 100, 110,
yeah,
and they're grouped together. But for this, we were all up there like five classes at once, but I was still kind of thinking in the back of my head, knowing that I cut a little bit of weight to 100, I was still kind of measuring myself with some of the 110 guys because I was going to be in one of those two classes. And I'm like, well, how would I do against this class? So I was watching the 110s a little bit closer than, say
right,
the men's 80 kilo class, just because it was like a little bit closer for me, I guess, mentally knowing that I was, going to be competing against either group of those people, depending on the weight cut. But yeah, 110 was stacked this year. Um, pretty ridiculous I mean, if we break it down real fast, what was the top axle? 204 kilos. So we're talking almost 450. Is
A
that
little over,
or,
a little over 450. Yeah.
okay? Okay, yeah, because that would be what am I thinking of? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
Oh, no,
like
no, no,
right.
no, you're right. You're right. No, sorry. I'm getting 449. 449.
Okay. Yeah. Just there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that. I mean, in recent years, I don't know if anybody's lifted that much on axle in that class. I don't
Yeah,
believe so.
yeah, yeah,
And then the 120 kilo lift by Marcus for Saxon. I mean, him and Yvonne tied, but you're talking about both those guys. I mean, lifting in the 260s. And, I don't know if Marcus took another attempt or if him and Yvonne both just kind of called it quits there because I know Yvonne didn't take
yeah. I
another
think they
attempt.
both just stopped. They just stopped. Yeah,
Yeah. So there maybe is a little bit of a question mark there if they wanted to take another 2.5 kilo jump or something.
yeah,
Might have been looking at something closer to 270 on the
yeah,
board or more. Like I said, I don't know what the ceiling would have been for them that day. And then, like I said, the vertical reps, there was definitely a difference because the weight pen was the same for these two classes. I do know that from
right.
competing. Um, but if you look at the vertical numbers, 100 kilo, we had two guys with 15 reps, second place 12 reps, third place 10 reps. You can go down here to the 110s and it's 26 reps, 20
Yeah,
reps, 22, 19, 14, 14, 10. Like there's definitely a little bit of a discrepancy there from class to class. So I
yeah,
mean, you know what I mean? If some of those 100 kilo guys were up, they'd be getting hit pretty hard on that V bar event. So
right.
myself included. So just something else looking at from the stats there. Then we get into our big guys, 125 kilo and 125
Yeah,
plus. Um, Taking the 125 class, no surprise when I mean, he's always on the border. So you typically is he a super heavy? Is he just going to be kind of regular heavyweight? Alexei Tukalov. Um, and yeah, I mean, he was just, I mean, Alexei's been doing this forever and another solid, well-rounded performance from him. He took all three events. I think it was interesting because second place was Jalen Worley and third place was Jay Smith. Um, I think they had a closer battle than what people realized
yeah,
from watching it live because that
yeah,
was a very close thing um, where Jay jumped up early on the axle and he pulled 451, I believe.
yeah,
And then Jalen got him back, but Jalen's top Saxon lift was really solid. But the lift before that was
yeah. I remember that.
was a little questionable. So
Yeah, I remember that.
like depending on getting that lift in a last man standing format where if you miss your out, had that lift not gone through and he didn't come back to hit the 125 and really put the stamp on the Saxon, they tied on the final event. So you're talking about one beating the other in axle, a close Saxon rate, or sorry, the other one beating the other guy pretty good on Saxon. So they kind of flipped both those events and
Yeah,
then tied on the last. So that's a close battle. So shout out to those guys for taking on Alexi and then having to kind of dig deep to you know nail it in the third event.
yeah,
And after that, yeah, the points kind of dropped off from there. But yeah, that top three was, like I said, Alexi was kind of just in a league of his own again. But seeing that the second and third place had some excitement in a back and forth battle was more fun for me to kind of check out.
yeah.
Um, and then anything else numbers wise you'd want to bring up there, Eric? I mean, I feel like, I mean, Alexi kind of pulled what he normally pulls. On all the lifts. So I don't see anything that was like a big shocker or like a 10-pound PR or something crazy.
Yeah, no, I'll just
Um,
give a shout out to Jay Smith. He's a fellow Canadian.
yeah,
He did a bit of grip a few years ago, but this was sort of his big first contest back, I believe. And, great result. Third place in a field of 11 at the Arnold. So I hope he sticks with it. Super strong guy.
yeah. And then I don't know what the reasoning was. I know Tim Connors was there. He didn't lift. But that could have been interesting had Tim decided to lift because we know where Tim's strength is and Tim's competed before. So we have,
Yeah. I
a
know he
rough
had some
estimate.
tennis elbow issues. He wasn't too sure how effective, and he anyway. So he had an elbow injury that I think he was considering maybe lifting, but then
Okay.
obviously he didn't. So yeah.
Okay. I won't make a tennis elbow joke. I'll let it go. Um, but 125 plus. Um, uh, Carl Meyersko taking it with 300 points. Kind of sealed the deal with the axle. I think the Saxon battle with Henry was probably the most exciting part of the day as far
Yeah.
as this class goes. Um, and yeah, like I said, and Derek Hudson in third place for that class. I mean, that was huge. I mean, Derek was, you know, all these guys are super strong and just monsters in general. But I mean, a lot of people had high expectations for Henry coming in. I think Henry definitely delivered on that.
Yeah.
Um, Everybody knows Carl. I mean, that's a pretty, there's always high expectations with him too. I mean, you're expected to be essentially first all the time. And then
Right.
Occasionally there might be that one slip up or maybe an injury or something. And then, something goes wrong. But people are already expecting Carl to be up at first all the time. Henry's coming in, thought that Carl would most likely get the edge on Axel, but didn't really know how Saxon would play out. And yeah, Saxon was a great battle, but Derek Hudson also not necessarily in contention with those two, but pulled some amazing lifts.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just
This is
very, very
probably
strong.
best contest to date. I know that was a huge PR for the Saxon. Yeah, very, very impressive.
So yeah, I mean, he lifted 125 and a half kilos. And I'm doing a little better at some of these conversions, but yeah, what's that coming out to?
276, 277, yeah.
Okay, yeah, a little over 275.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to pull that, I mean, anytime you're starting to talk that on a 3-inch Saxon, it's pretty elite. There's not many people pulling those kind of numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep going. Yep.
I think Henry was very happy with the result. Obviously, he knew that defeating Carl was a tall order, but he definitely held his own. I think
Yes.
I think he was very happy overall with his performance. And Jason Cooper, who's another guy who's only been doing this a year. So Jason Cooper, I believe, won the Open division last year at the Arnolds.
Yes.
210 Axel. I mean, the guy is strong. His Saxon isn't quite as high as the other guys, but he's not too far behind.
No, yeah, I mean that's still over 230 pound Saxon. So with a little bit of adjustment or some training,
Yeah.
you bring that up over the course of a year, assuming he wants to do the Arnold, or he could do 100 other competitions as well. But if
he was at the Shaw Classic, so that he's interested. He's starting to travel. So yeah.
And I guess the only thing I would point out as far as Saxon lifts go, Carl and Henry tied at 140 kilos. Henry jumped up to attempt the world record. And I mean, almost all of Henry's reps looked like they were still warm-ups. And then when Henry got to the world record, it still basically moved the same. It just happened to pop out at the top.
Right.
So, I mean, it sucks when you have a world record like that kind of locked in and you move it almost, you almost move it so well. And you basically get it like right there, but you just don't seal the lockout.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Henry definitely impressed me throughout that process, because as him and Carl were, taking turns coming back out, going jump for jump, it looked like it was taking Carl a lot more exertion and it was a lot more taxing on Carl. And
Right.
Henry just kept pulling every rep like it was kind of still a warm up. And
Right.
it really looked that way until it did. I mean, I don't say it didn't. It looked that way up until the world record. It just popped out.
Right.
It really didn't look like Henry changed anything or the speed was different. I mean, the guy still pulled 140 kilos he pulled 140 kilos like effortless almost. But the next jump, whatever the jump was above that, he pulled it. It almost looked like the prior 3 reps or so.
Right.
And it just, one hand slipped off and you only get that minute to come back and try to recover. So it's tough to do, especially after you've already pulled so many maximal weights or heavy weights, going back and forth. So they ended up tying on that. And then Carl took the grandfather clock medley with 17 reps over Henry's 13. But yeah, that, and like I said, Derek Hudson taking third there. So that would round out the super heavies. But yeah, I think overall, man, it was I don't know, it was an interesting competition because there was definitely some surprises, like, certain people may be upsetting certain guys in certain lifts, newer lifters hitting numbers that maybe we didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
I think Henry on Saxon was really good to see because I mean that was one of the, like I said, most exciting parts of the competition for me as a spectator.
Right.
But yeah, just as an overview, moments that sort of stood out. I think Marcus taking the 110 class was a pretty powerful display.
Yeah.
Carl and Henry kind of battling back and forth on Saxon stands out. And then, yeah, just, I mean, well, you and Devin Lee going back and forth at 90. There was a lot of exciting stuff. And I'm kind of just speaking on that second day. I could bring up, we already mentioned a lot of the women's lifters and stuff that went on with the Masters earlier. But yeah, I think overall, a lot of close battles and a lot of fun to watch. I wish the scheduling would be slightly different, but outside of that, yeah, I don't know. Anything to add? And then I might have one last question for you after you add something. But you feel pretty good with most of everything we covered?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know this is a bit of a longer recap, but it was a very big, interesting contest. So apologies to the viewers, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of things we wanted to highlight today.
Well, yeah, and say if it goes too long, then just skip to your class and ignore the other stuff, or just listen to like a couple weight classes a day as you drive to work. You can break it
Right.
up. You don't have to do it all in one go. I
Right.
say I know most of you people probably binge 8 hours of Netflix in a row or get through your favorite series and you make it. Not saying that this is as exciting or entertaining as whatever else you're watching. I get it. It's not. It's two dudes just reading off numbers off a spreadsheet and giving a little bit of context. But yeah, just break it up. If you don't have to pull the marathon, you don't have to binge it. Break it up into small chunks or just skim through and hit your highlights.
Yes.
Last thing I was going to ask you, Eric, is this is something that I was thrown off by during the competition, and I just want to get your opinion as somebody who's hosted a lot. You've done multiple formats. You know what I mean? You've just hosted so many different competitions. I know that it's percentage based scoring, right? But do you think that it is fair or the best route to go to do a percentage based scoring with a 1 minute rep out event like this grandfather medley? Because in my opinion, I feel like there's a little discrepancy with the scoring where the final event in that medley format almost outweighs what's happening for 2/3 of the competition in some cases. And I almost find that if you're doing max attempts to find max strength, and that's what we're testing, then the percentage based scoring seems to be a little more consistent. But when we get into a minute where lifters aren't lifting maximal weight, sometimes they're not even really reaching an endurance point because they rep it out for the entire minute. And we're just going off a judge's call and how many calls you get or who regrips the least. You're not really judging strength. So I bring that up just to wonder, like, do you think that the percentage based scoring is effective when one of the events is not max weight like the other two? Because I only bring this up because I found myself a little bit shocked that in my weight class, I outlifted a person by 11 pounds on Saxon, over 20 pounds on Axel, and then just a handful of reps on the last medley was like, well, like I was like one rep off of getting beat. It's like, how do you outlift somebody almost 30, 40 pounds in the first two lifts? And then, oh, it's a 1 minute rep out and they just, regrip a couple less times and pull, 4 or 5 more reps. And it's like, I just don't know that would signify, like, what are we testing? Are we testing max strength or is it just something a little different? But I don't know. I'll let you talk on it, but
Yeah.
it's hard to judge.
Yeah, so I would say the format is not ideal. I think the way that Ricardo scores it, so it's for those who don't understand how the last event is scored. If you at least get one rep on the first pin, you'll have at least 50 points, 50 out of 100. If you get at least one rep on the second pin, you'll get at least 70. if you get at least one rep. On the third pin, you'll have at least 80. But will be um, the actual score per rep is based on the best guy in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So if the best guy gets 10 reps on the third pin, that means each rep on that pin is 2 points. So the guy who gets 10 reps goes from 80 to 100. He gets 100 points, and each rep is worth 2 points. Mm-hmm. So it is a variable. One rep in one weight class could be worth half a point. In another weight class could be worth 2 or 3 points. It really depends on what people are lifting. So it's definitely less predictable than the other two events for scoring. I know it is a time issue. That's why that third event is run, so that it only takes a minute per person. If they had more time, I think it would be better to have like the first two events, max weight, last man standing. Mm-hmm. So I think for the Arnolds, it's really a scheduling thing. So it's not perfect. It's definitely less predictable. I don't think it's horrible. It's not my preference. I've never run my own contest with this formula, but I sort of at least understand why it's like that. But it can be it can throw some surprising swings into the mix. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's all I was saying. I mean, we all know the rule set. We all know what we signed up for. Right. So you know what it is going into it. You can't complain about it. But yeah, I agree with you. It has that little bit of like, other things. If you were just doing like a max weight, you could kind of say, okay, I beat this person by this and that. That's roughly this much. Okay, I just got to beat him on this. Whereas like, I guess in my case, I'm thinking like, I would have assumed once I hit 382, based on what everybody else hit on Axel, I'm like, well, almost doesn't even matter what I do on the last event. I'm probably going to be sitting in third at a minimum.
Right.
And then you find out later, you're like, oh, we're like separated by 2 points. Like, glad I pulled 400. It was kind of shocking to me because it's like, man, I just assumed, taking 2 out of 3 events, and granted, like I said, it's percentage-based scoring, so it's still going off the top guy for both classes and stuff. Right. But yeah, it almost threw me off when awards were handing out or when we had to like line up in order, because I'm kind of like, man, this was way closer than I imagined. Because in my head, I was just thinking that like, it almost didn't matter going into those last reps, and it was almost like, no, like every single rep mattered. To the end.
It definitely does. And Dylan, who took fourth, he did have the best result in that event, right? Tied with Cliff. So,
yeah. Oh yeah. 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 No, like I said, it's definitely good. It's an interesting format. And I guess in my head, I would almost, granted, you have to cap it at a minute because or make the weights heavier. It's tough to find the sweet spot.
It becomes a challenge. Like if I look just at your weight class, I think that means the weight should be higher for next year, right? If everyone's getting at least 6 reps, it's probably because it's not heavy enough. Because you don't want people maxing out their minute, and the difference between 28 and 29 really. It just means that it was way too easy for you, basically. So yeah, but I think it's probably a challenge to find a weight that's not too hard and not too easy. So, it's one of the limiting factors, I think, of a contest with 130 competitors and the time.
Yeah.
So
like I said, all I was asking you with that was really, just trying to get an idea of like, if you had an opinion on the way it's weighted or the way it's scored, because it almost seems to me that someone could sort of, and not that you would want to, because you don't necessarily know how to predict everything, right? But it almost seems like you could sandbag the first 2 events, and as long as you're really good on the third event, you could almost overthrow 2 like key lifts, like 2/3 of the event. You could almost overthrow with just one good performance. And
I don't think it's quite that easy to do. You still have to be close on the first 2 to win it on the third. It's like I said, you're already starting. 1 rep is you're already 80 plus, right, on the last event. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know, in my head, like I said, I felt like, man, if it, not that we're scoring it this way, but if it was going by like a total, it's like, oh, well, you're up almost like 30 some pounds. overall, which,
Right.
percentage wise might come out a little closer than what it sounds,
Right.
um, but yeah, that was my only question was just, the scoring of that format, because I feel like we've seen a lot of things in competitions where the first two events seem like everything's kind of in place and it's moving sort of a certain way. And then the medley comes in and then it's just like, oh, will someone hit whatever? And then it's like, boom, the whole,
Right.
we probably named, I don't know, 5 or 6 other examples as we were going through stuff, just wasn't paying attention. But that was
Right.
it. Like I said, won't ramble about that. It was just a scoring question and just curious to get your opinion in the moment while I had you here. But
Yeah.
other than that, yeah, shout out to all the lifters that competed, made the trip, whether it be across the country or international. Um, and yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to talk with everybody or meet all the people that I wanted to, but those I did get to hang out with and, get to know a little bit better. I think everything was a lot of fun and I had a good time lifting. And as you mentioned, as we started to begin the show, I think everything mostly ran pretty smooth. And I think it was another solid year at the Arnold, lifting and competing, and good battles, good performances all the way around. And just, yeah, shout out to everybody that made the trip and put in all the hard work and training and, you know,
I agree.
yeah, went to battle. So, yeah, anything to finish up with, Eric? I'll let you go.
No, but if you haven't been to the Arnold's yet, it's definitely a good an event you want to hit once. If you take this sport seriously and you want to see how you measure up against the top guys and men and women, put it on your agenda. If not next year, at some point in the future.
Yeah, no, good advice, Eric. And like I said, with that, we'll let you guys go. So until next time, we'll see you.